Welcome back to the Roadmap to Retirement podcast. I'm your host, Alex Neary. We are flying solo today.
This is Roadmap to Retirement. Tune in for financial tips, investment strategies, and smart money moves to supercharge your retirement savings. Alex Neary, CFP, and guests are here to help you build your roadmap to retirement.
I've got a couple topics in mind that I wanted to cover, and I think that solo is the best way to do that. The first is one that we see a lot with retirees. So one of the biggest problems that seems to be facing retirees, at least the ones that we're working with, is this kind of having too much money problem, which on the surface doesn't sound like a problem at all. It seems like a good problem to have, and I would agree with that. I would rather have too much money than too little, of course. So here's how it plays out. So we see this all the time. I'll just say it's a couple, could be the same for a single person, but let's say it's a couple, married couple, they retire in their early 60s. They did a great job saving. They saved money into their 401k, 403b, Roth IRAs, whatever it is for decades. They saved money for 40 plus years in preparation for retirement. Also, maybe they work somewhere where they got a pension, which is becoming increasingly rare. But let's say that this couple has a pension or two between them. And of course, they have Social Security that they'll be able to take at some point. They retire, their house is paid off, which is great. They have adult children that are financially independent. So they did a great job parenting and their kids are not dependent on them. That's great. So their house is paid off. They're not paying for kid stuff anymore. So they're in a situation where their bills are lower than they've ever been, and they're retired, and they've got a pension and Social Security that they live on very comfortably. So what's the money for? Let's say they've saved $2 million into 401ks, Roth IRAs, other types of investment accounts, and it's sitting there, and they say the same thing that every other retiree says. It's there for me someday, but if I don't have to take it, I'm not going to. I'm going to live off of my pension and Social Security, and I'm going to be very comfortable doing that. These are typically your millionaire next door people. They never lived a expensive lifestyle, and they don't intend to start to. And really what happens is you shape your behavior over those 4 decades where you're saving money. Picture the same couple 30 years ago. Maybe they had young kids at home. They had a new mortgage that seemed like a big deal. And they were making sacrifices. They weren't going out to eat. They weren't spending money on themselves, going on vacations even, because they knew that they wanted to save for retirement. So someday they could retire comfortably. So they make sacrifices in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. And now they're in their 60s and retired and they have all this money. And it's like, what do we do with it? And typically, I think early in retirement, if I'm talking to like a 62-year-old, it's pretty easy for them to just say, I might need it someday. Things are going to change. We have inflation. Maybe I want to take that big trip. Eventually, my house is going to need a roof. There's always like this house project at home that it sounds expensive and it is expensive, but it's probably not going to cost $2 million. And then as we get towards our late 60s, early 70s, there starts to be this realization of I'm probably not going to spend all this money. And if that's true, what do I want to do with it? The default setting, if you have children, is my kids are my beneficiaries. Someday when I'm not here, they can spend this money. And no, that's not why I saved that money, but at least it's going to someone I love and care about, and maybe they'll need it and it'll help them out of a tough situation. So there's a couple things here psychologically. First is if you made these sacrifices for years to save for your own retirement, do you deserve to spend that money on yourself? I'll tell you the answer. The answer is yes. Part two is, will you actually do it? And I talk to people about this all the time. I coach people through their retirement. It's what I do professionally. It's really hard to just flip the switch and go blow money on stupid stuff. Excuse my French. But I think if you can start to find things that have meaning, and I'll give you a few examples in a minute here, but if you can tie meaning back to that money and make spending it enjoyable and something that gives you fulfillment, that makes it worthwhile. So a couple examples of what can I spend this money on? First, we already talked about the reality that whatever's left over is probably going to be inherited by your kids, or if you don't have kids, maybe it's a niece or nephew or somebody else in your life. And if that's the case, and if you have the means to do, would it be better to gift some money to your adult children today while you're alive and you're here to still see them spend and enjoy that money rather than having them spend that money decades later when you're no longer here? I find that for a lot of retirees, taking X amount of dollars per year and giving it to each adult child so that they can improve their home, buy a home, support their grandkids, whatever it is, I think that's a lot more meaningful to most people than just letting the money sit there, invested and growing and all that good stuff, but not ever getting to truly get any sense of fulfillment for the money that you worked hard, sacrificed to earn, invest, and save. So that's one idea. Another idea is charities. We have a lot of people that maybe they do or don't want to leave something behind to their beneficiary, but they'd love to support a charity. There's a lot of great ways that you can tax efficiently take money from those IRAs or other investment accounts and transfer them to a charity that you know and care about. Again, this could be a beneficiary in your account someday. You could just say, I'm going to leave my money behind to this charity. But if we're trying to have fulfillment in our own lifetime and we have money that we know is ours to spare, sometimes supporting a charity can be a great way to have meaning. So those are some very selfless ways that you can use your money, supporting your kids, supporting a charity. I think it's also worth noting that we can be a little selfish with this money and still get fulfillment. So what are the things that you never got to do in your life that you really want to do? What are your bucket list items and what do they cost? Maybe your bucket list item is to, I don't know, on the spot, let me think of something cheap. Read every book in the library and you can go to your public library and read every book. Okay, let's say that's a bucket list item that's maybe exaggerating how cheap it can be. But if you have ideas of traveling or spending time with family, attending events, I think there's a great opportunity there to not only take that trip, but to do it in a way that you never would have in the past. Meaning, if your bucket list trip is you really want to go to Japan, you're going to do 2 weeks in Japan, maybe you can plan that trip in a way where you are allowing yourself to spend at a level that you never would have dreamed of in your 30s, 40s, and 50s. But now that you're in retirement, and you know that you're not going to live forever, and you know that you have this extra money on the sidelines, maybe it's okay for you to fly first class to Japan. And if you're listening to this and you're curious what that costs, Google it. It's not cheap. A first class ticket to Japan is more than you've ever spent on a flight. I can almost guarantee it. But you have the money to do it. If that brings you joy and you want to have that experience just one time in your life of what is it like to take this trip and do it at the highest level. Take the first class ticket, stay in a hotel nicer than that we normally would have. Go to restaurants that are maybe out of the budget you would normally spend and allow yourself for those 2 weeks to live like a king or queen because you deserve it, because you made those sacrifices, and see how that feels. You might find that it's not for you at all. I've had people come back to me and say, hey, I flew first class. I wanted to try it. I know I can afford it, but I just felt guilty the entire time. And if that's the case, maybe it's not for you, but give it a go. So, traveling is a very common bucket list item, but there's other ones. I know people that they talk about their life. They say, "Oh, when I was 25 years old, my dream was to own a Corvette." And it's a little bit of a cliche to see. I have this picture in my mind of a white-haired old man getting into his Corvette, taking the top down and driving down the road. But maybe that's not for you. Maybe it is. But something like that. Maybe you do want to have that possession, and you feel guilty saying that out loud. But it's okay to want things. So that's a common scenario we see. I think the message here, if you are in that retirement phase of life or you're just heading to it, is start to build an idea of what you want to do with your money. Saving for saving's sake is great. And if you've oversaved or did a great job saving, or even just the investments have performed really well. And I think that's a lot of times how you get into the situation is if you were diligent about your financial plan for decades and you set aside 20% of your paycheck consistently and you had done the math 30 years ago and you said, this should get me in a position to retire comfortably, the reality is you've probably done better. If you look at the run the market's been on, we'll say coming out of 2008, and yes, there's been some hiccups in that time, it's very possible that you have more money today than what you had planned on having. So that's how you get in that situation of having too much money is market performs well, you did your part saving, and you haven't had to touch it, which is a good thing. So that was one topic I wanted to cover. The next thing that I wanted to get into a little bit is maybe for the younger folks, and it's talking a little bit about the temptation of debt, which that sounds like an exciting topic, right? So we see people fall into this debt trap of usually it starts with a low interest rate, right? It's I need to buy a car. I go to the dealership, and what's the first thing they're going to ask me? They're going to ask me what my payment is or what my payment should be. What is the payment I have now? What am I used to? And also, what would I like my payment to be? How much am I looking to spend? And from there, the dealership uses this trick of backing into making that payment $500 a month if that's what you want. And they can do all kinds of tricks with spreading out the payments, putting more down initially, adjusting the interest rate to get you to buy that vehicle, which is a bit of a segue from my original point. My real point here is people see the low interest rate and they now say, I shouldn't pay it off because the rate's low, which I can agree with, and I can now afford to buy more. So the simple question of what car can you afford, we have to define afford first. If I define afford as what car can you go take money from your bank account today and buy that car in cash, it's a very different answer than how much of a monthly payment can you afford. And this is where you get into that debt snowball. So I see this all the time. People rack up payments and maybe they have, I've met with a couple a few weeks ago and they had about $3,000 of monthly debt payments outside of their mortgage. So not even including the mortgage. This is student loans, car payments, credit cards. There might have been a home equity loan in there for a project. I'd have to go back and look. But the point is, they get into this trap of debt and they justify it by saying that the interest rate's low, so I shouldn't pay it off, right? You hear this all the time. The car dealership gives me a 3% interest rate on my new car. My investments could be performing at 7, 8, 10%, whatever it is. So it makes sense mathematically that I should pay more money into my investments. I should invest more rather than the opportunity cost of paying down my debt. That makes sense, but it gets us to this lifestyle creep that I think is a little bit out of control for most people. So, what's the right answer? And I think this is a behavioral finance question that's interesting for a lot of people is when is it appropriate to use that low interest debt? And how long should I let it hang out there? So I think you got to look at it as good debt versus bad debt, which is open-ended, but good debt is things like I'm investing myself. So student loans are part of that. I would say that if you're doing it correctly, it's okay to take student loans. A mortgage, I'll admit that the reality is most 20-something-year-olds are not buying a house in cash. A car, is a car good debt? Maybe. I think a car that meets your basic means is good debt. If you're going out there and buying a, whatever, I'll pick on Honda, a used Honda Civic, and you're going to buy it from a used dealership and you're going to get a good price on it, and you need a loan to do that, that's okay. That's what you need to do. That's probably good debt. If you're going to the Mercedes dealership and buying a new G-Wagon, probably not good debt because we can probably agree, even if it's a cool car, that is more than you need to meet your needs of life. So I would put that into the bad category of debt. So be very careful when you leverage these opportunities for low interest. Of course, if you have to borrow money to buy a car, that's okay. Of course, a low interest rate is better than a high interest rate, but I would still encourage you to pay it off relatively quickly. These dealerships that offer, I think I saw somewhere there's a 10-year loan for a car. I think that's stupid. Don't do that. If you're not going to have that car for 10 years, then what? You're going to be upside down in a car. That's no good. So the main point I want to drive home here is even if the interest rate is low, it's probably still not in your best interest. The dealerships are not losing money on you, right? If they offer you a introductory rate or a special rate on a new car, they're still making money. So be careful with the debt snowball. We will wrap it up there. Before we do, though, I like to end every episode by diving into one of the questions that I think you should ask a financial advisor. So this is meant for if you're meeting with an advisor for the first time, or maybe it's an existing relationship, what is the question you should be asking that professional while you're vetting them and deciding if it's the right person to work with? I started this list, and it's not that original. Other advisors have it too, but I started this list with the idea that most people, when they meet with an advisor, really don't know what to ask. They're going there, they're probably nervous, it's uncomfortable. Maybe they've never met with an advisor before, and they just say, here, let's take my money. So one question that I think you should ask is, well, it's a two-part question. It's how long have you been an advisor for, and how long will you be an advisor for? So what we want to do here is you probably want somebody with some experience, right? So I'm not picking on the young people that are getting started. I was definitely there once, but you want to be aware of how long they're doing it. If it's their first day on the job, you should probably consider what that means. But also, if they've been doing it for 30, 40 years, that sounds great, right? They have a lot of experience, but where are they going to be in another 10 years? If you're retiring today and you're 60 years old and the advisor you're working with is also 60 years old, that's probably not something that's going to carry you throughout your retirement. So I would either want to find a younger professional that is going to be there for the long haul, or if you are working with an older person, that nothing wrong with that. They have a lot of experience, and I could see why that would be attractive. But what is their succession plan? Do they have somebody younger in their office that's going to step in when they do choose to retire? Is that person someone you want to work with? Are they experienced themselves? Do they have the right approach that is a good personality fit for you and your family? So, in summary, how long have you been doing it? How long are you going to be doing it? And see what they say. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member FINRA and SIPC. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision. Individual tax or legal matters should be discussed with your tax or legal professional.